The sky above Seoul turned black at exactly 14:32 hours. Not from clouds or storms, but from the shadows of 300 alien warships blocking out the sun. Admiral Jiho stood on the command deck of the orbital station, watching the screens as similar scenes played across every continent. New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, everywhere. The massive ships appeared like dark omens hanging in the atmosphere. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," said the communications officer, her hands shaking as she worked the controls. Jiho nodded, his weathered face calm despite the chaos erupting around him. He had served in Earth's United Defense Fleet for 30 years, but nothing could have prepared him for this moment. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and it was not the peaceful first contact everyone had hoped for. The main screen flickered to life. A creature appeared, tall, with gray-scaled skin and 4 glowing eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on its elongated head. It wore armor that seemed to shimmer with purple energy. When it spoke, the translation came through in perfect English, though the voice was cold and mechanical. "Primitive species of the planet you call Earth," the alien said. "I am Commander Dravix of the Velkaran Empire. Your world has been selected for integration into our domain. You have 48 hours to surrender all military assets and government control. Comply and your population will be allowed to serve. Resist and you will be erased." This is not a negotiation. The transmission ended abruptly. The command deck fell silent. Jiho could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Someone dropped a data pad, and the clatter seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. "Get me Chief Diplomatic Officer Hana," Jiho said finally. "And someone contact Taiyang at Weapons Development. Tell him we need every option on the table." Hana arrived within the hour, her professional suit somehow still perfect despite rushing through 3 security checkpoints. She was younger than Jiho, but her reputation as Earth's finest negotiator was well earned. She had prevented 2 civil wars and negotiated the Mars Treaty. But this was different. "They didn't even give us a chance to respond," she said, reviewing the transmission data. "This is a declaration, not a discussion. Can we talk to them?" Jiho asked. "I'll try. But Admiral, if they've done this before..." She didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what she meant. An empire didn't build 300 warships for their first conquest. The meeting took place on neutral ground, a small shuttle bay that had been hastily converted into a conference room. Hana led the human delegation, flanked by 2 security officers. Jiho insisted on coming too. Against protocol, but under the circumstances, protocol seemed meaningless. The Velkaran delegation arrived with an arrogance that filled the room like a bad smell. There were 3 of them, led by a diplomat whose name translated roughly as Speaker Velox. He looked at the humans the way someone might look at insects. "You requested this meeting," Velox said, not bothering to sit. "You waste time you do not have." Hana stepped forward, keeping her voice steady and professional. "We want to understand your terms. Surely there's room for negotiation. Earth has resources, knowledge, cultural..." "We have conquered 847 worlds," Velox interrupted. "Your resources are trivial. Your knowledge is primitive. Your culture is irrelevant. You will submit or you will die. These are the only terms." Jiho felt his jaw tighten. He had dealt with bullies before. Admirals drunk on their own power. Politicians who thought might made right. But this was different. This was an entire civilization built on the idea that strength was the only currency that mattered. "Let me show you something," Hana said, gesturing to a holographic display. She brought up statistics, Earth's military capabilities, their orbital defense platforms, their fleet composition. It was a carefully prepared presentation meant to show that humanity wasn't helpless. Velox watched for exactly 30 seconds before he began laughing. It was a harsh barking sound that made Hana flinch. The other Velkaran diplomats joined in. "You think your toys frighten us?" Velox said. "We have seen 1,000 species show us their weapons. They all knelt eventually. Or they burned." Jiho stepped forward before Hana could respond. His calm demeanor was gone, replaced by something harder, colder. He looked Velox directly in his 4 glowing eyes. "Leave now," Jiho said quietly. "Take your ships and go. You won't get a second chance." The laughter stopped. Velox stared at the human admiral, his expression shifting from amusement to something like curiosity, then back to contempt. "Is that a threat?" Velox asked. "It's a warning," Jiho replied. "The only one you'll receive." Velox made a gesture that might have been their equivalent of a dismissive wave. We accept your surrender deadline. 48 hours. When your time expires, we will demonstrate the price of defiance. The Velkaran delegation left without another word. Hana turned to Jiho, her face pale. Admiral, what are you doing? We need more time to— We don't need time, Jiho said. We need them to make a mistake. And they just did. The next 48 hours were the longest in human history. Across Earth, people watched the skies with a mixture of fear and defiance. Some fled to underground shelters. Others stood on rooftops, refusing to hide. The news channels ran constant coverage, interviewing experts who had nothing to say because humanity had never faced anything like this before. On the orbital station, Jiho met with his senior staff. Captain Nari from Aurora Station joined via video link, her expression grim but determined. Taiyang came in person, carrying data chips with information so classified that even most of the Defense Council didn't know it existed. How much do they know about us? Jiho asked. Only what we wanted them to know, Taiyang replied. He loaded the data onto the main screen and Jiho felt his breath catch. The information was staggering. 5 years ago, Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Network had detected something, a small scout ship surveying the solar system from beyond Pluto's orbit. Instead of making contact, humanity's leaders had made a different choice. They watched. They learned. And they prepared. We let them think we're primitive, Taiyang explained. Every piece of intelligence they gathered was carefully controlled. They think our weapons are kinetic missiles and laser platforms. They think our shields are basic. They think our fleet is all we have. And the truth? Nari asked from her video feed. Taiyang smiled, but there was no humor in it. The truth is that for 5 years, the brightest minds on Earth have been preparing for exactly this scenario. We studied them. We know their tactics, their technology, their weaknesses. We've built weapons they don't know exist. We've prepared strategies they've never seen before. Jiho looked at the countdown timer on the screen. 36 hours remained. In orbit above Earth, the Velkaran ships waited with the patience of predators who had never known defeat. Send orders to all military installations, Jiho said. Begin evacuation procedures. Make it look panicked, desperate. Let them think we're running scared. Sir, one of the junior officers questioned. They expect us to beg or to fight stupidly, Jiho explained. We're going to do neither. When that deadline expires, they're going to attack what they think are our most important assets, and they're going to find out that everything they know about humanity is wrong. The timer continued its countdown. Across Earth, military bases began their carefully choreographed evacuations. To the Velkaran sensors watching from orbit, it must have looked like chaos and fear. They didn't know they were watching the opening moves of a trap 5 years in the making. Jiho stood alone on the observation deck as the final hours ticked away, looking down at Earth. The planet that had given birth to his species, that had nurtured humanity from primitive tribes to a spacefaring civilization. He thought about the warning he'd given Commander Dravix. The Velkarans had conquered 847 worlds. They were about to learn that Earth would not be number 848. The countdown reached 0, and in orbit above Earth, the Velkaran warships powered up their weapons. The war had begun. The first Velkaran bombardment started at dawn over the Pacific. Commander Dravix had chosen his targets carefully: military installations, defense platforms, manufacturing centers. The purple energy beams lanced down from orbit, striking with precision that spoke of countless previous invasions. On the command deck, Jiho watched the strikes with no emotion on his face. The junior officers around him were tense, waiting for orders to return fire. But Jiho remained still, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the tactical display. Sir, they're hitting Beijing Installation 7, reported the tactical officer. Direct hit on the main building. Confirmed empty? Jiho asked. Yes, sir. Evacuated 12 hours ago as ordered. Across the globe, the pattern repeated. Every target the Velkarans hit had been abandoned. Massive military complexes stood empty. Their equipment moved to hidden locations weeks before. The aliens were attacking ghosts. In orbit aboard his flagship, Dravix frowned at his display screens. His tactical officer approached, confusion evident in his stance. Commander, our scans show minimal heat signatures at all target sites. It appears they evacuated. Cowards, Dravix muttered. They run and hide like prey animals. Continue bombardment of secondary targets. What Dravix didn't know was that every scan his ships made, every piece of intelligence they gathered, was being carefully monitored by Earth's forces. Taeyang sat in a hidden facility deep beneath the Alps, watching the Velkaran fleet's movements with a team of analysts. "They're following pattern Delta," one analyst reported. "Just like the simulations predicted." "Good," Taeyang replied. "Send the signal to Minho. Begin Phase 2. High above the Earth's atmosphere, fighter pilot Minho sat in his cockpit, his squadron of 12 ships positioned near the moon. They had been waiting in silence for hours, their ship systems running on minimal power to avoid detection. "All units, this is lead," Minho said into his communication system. "Light them up and run. Make it look real." The 12 fighters suddenly powered up, their engines burning bright on Velkaran sensors. Immediately, alarm systems on the alien ships began screaming. A squadron of human fighters appearing from nowhere, heading away from Earth at high speed. "Pursuit squadron, engage and eliminate," Dravix ordered. "Show these primitives what happens when they resist." 40 Velkaran fighters launched, their sleek ships accelerating after Minho's squadron. The chase led away from Earth past the moon, heading toward the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Minho kept his squadron just fast enough to stay ahead, but not so fast that the Velkarans would break off pursuit. "Lead, they're gaining," reported his wingman. "We need to go faster." "Negative," Minho replied. "Stay on course. Trust the plan." They entered the asteroid belt, weaving between the massive space rocks. The Velkaran fighters followed, confident in their superior numbers and technology. What they didn't notice was that many of these asteroids weren't natural at all. "Now," Minho said quietly. The asteroids came alive. What appeared to be rock and ice split open, revealing hidden weapons platforms, railguns, missile pods, and laser batteries, all concealed for years, waiting for this exact moment. The Velkaran fighters flew directly into a killing field. The battle was over in seconds. 38 Velkaran fighters were destroyed before they could react. Only 2 escaped, fleeing back toward their main fleet with damage reports and shocked warnings. On his flagship, Dravix stared at the reports in disbelief. Impossible. The intelligence they gathered showed the humans had primitive defenses. Where did these weapons come from? "Commander, we're detecting power surges across the human defensive grid," his sensor officer reported. "Whatever they're hiding, they're activating it now." On Mars, Engineer Una stood in the main control room of what appeared to be a mining facility. Around her, dozens of technicians worked at their stations, bringing systems online that had been dormant for years. "Dead Hand Defense Grid is fully active," Una announced, all platforms responding. "We have firing solutions on 80% of their fleet." The Dead Hand system was humanity's secret weapon, thousands of hidden platforms scattered throughout the solar system, disguised as mining equipment, satellites, and space debris. For 5 years they had been placed and prepared. Now they revealed themselves. Back at Aurora Station, Captain Nari finally received the order she'd been waiting for. Her platform, which the Velkarans believed was a simple orbital station, began its transformation. Panels slid away, revealing the true structure beneath. A massive railgun system capable of accelerating projectiles to a fraction of light speed. "Target the flagship," Nari ordered. Full power, the railgun fired. There was no dramatic sound in space, just a brief flash of energy. The projectile, a dense tungsten rod, crossed the distance between Aurora Station and the Velkaran flagship in less than a second. It struck with the force of a nuclear weapon. The flagship's shields, designed to stop energy weapons, did nothing against the solid projectile. It punched through the ship's hull, through 3 decks and out the other side. The damage was catastrophic. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the ship as atmosphere vented into space. But Nari wasn't finished. She adjusted her aim and fired again. And again. Each shot tore through a different Velkaran capital ship. The aliens scrambled to respond, but their return fire splashed harmlessly against Aurora. Station's shields that were far more advanced than the intelligence report suggested. Dravix pulled himself up from where the impact had thrown him. His command deck was in chaos, crew members working frantically to restore systems. Blood ran from a cut on his head, his own purple blood mixing with the damaged equipment. "Damage report," he demanded. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 9. Shield generators offline. We've lost 40% of our main power. Commander, we need to retreat and regroup." Dravix wanted to argue, to demand they press the attack, but he was a veteran of hundreds of battles. He knew when a situation had turned against him. This was supposed to be an easy conquest. Instead, they had walked into a trap. All ships fall back to Rally Point Theta, he ordered. We need to reassess and— Commander, we have a problem, the sensor officer interrupted. We're detecting multiple ships emerging from the far side of the moon. They were hiding in the moon's shadow, using it to block our sensors. On the tactical display, Dravix watched as ship after ship appeared. Not the small human vessels they had been expecting, but warships. Sleek, deadly, and far more advanced than the intelligence reports suggested. The ships moved with precision, cutting off the Velkaran retreat routes. Jiho stood on his command deck watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The trap was complete. The Velkaran fleet was surrounded, damaged, and confused. But he took no pleasure in it. War was never something to celebrate. Open a channel to Commander Dravix, Jiho ordered. A moment later, Dravix's face appeared on the screen. The Velkaran commander looked shaken, his confidence shattered. Behind him, Jiho could see crew members running, trying to control the chaos. Commander Dravix, Jiho said calmly, I gave you a warning. I told you that you wouldn't get a second chance. Did you think those were empty words? Dravix said nothing, his four eyes staring at the human admiral with something that might have been respect or might have been fear. You've conquered 847 worlds, Jiho continued. You studied them after you arrived, but we studied you before you came. 5 years ago, you sent scouts to watch us. Did you really think we didn't notice? Did you think we would just wait passively for you to return? The realization showed on Dravix's face. The humans had known everything. The intelligence reports, the seemingly primitive defenses, the easy targets, it had all been theater. A carefully constructed deception to make the Velkarans overconfident. Every piece of information you gathered about Earth was fed to you by us, Jiho said. We let you think we were weak. We let you think we would be an easy victory, and you believed it because that's what you wanted to believe. Throughout the solar system, the trap continued to close. Hidden platforms fired on Velkaran ships. Human fighters, far more advanced than the enemy expected, swarmed through their formations. The mighty invasion fleet that had darkened Earth's skies was being systematically destroyed. But Jiho knew this was just the beginning. An empire that had conquered 847 worlds wouldn't give up after one defeat. They would send more ships, more weapons, more warriors. This first battle was a victory, but the war was far from over. You have two choices, Commander Dravix, Jiho said. You can surrender now, and we'll allow you to leave with your surviving ships. Or you can continue fighting, and we'll destroy every last vessel in your fleet. Choose quickly. Dravix looked around his damaged command deck. He thought of his empire, his honor, his duty, but he also thought of the crew members who would die if he chose pride over pragmatism. We will withdraw, Dravix said finally, the words clearly painful to speak. But this isn't over, human. My empire will return with a force you cannot imagine. We're counting on it, Jiho replied, and closed the channel. Deep in Velkaran space, 3,000 light-years from Earth, the High Council received Commander Dravix's report in stunned silence. The council chamber was vast, carved from black stone and lit by purple flames that never consumed their fuel. 12 council members sat in a circle, their expressions ranging from disbelief to fury. Impossible, Council Leader Thrain declared. No species has ever defeated a Velkaran armada on their first encounter. Your report must be flawed. I wish it were, Dravix replied through the communication link. His image flickered in the center of the chamber, still bearing the wounds from the battle. But I've sent you the sensor data. The humans were prepared. They had been preparing for years. The council reviewed the data in silence. Ships emerging from hiding, weapons far beyond what their intelligence suggested. A perfectly executed trap. It was humiliating, but it was also undeniable. General Thexar, Thrain said, turning to the military commander who stood at the edge of the chamber. You will take 3 full fleets and crush this human resistance. Make an example of their world. General Thexar was legendary among the Velkaran military, a veteran of 200 campaigns, never defeated, never questioned. He bowed his head in acknowledgement. It will be done, Council Leader, but I request access to all intelligence on this species. If they were capable of deceiving us once, we cannot underestimate them again. Agreed, Thrain said. Take whatever resources you need. Show the galaxy what happens to those who defy the Velkaran Empire. On Earth, Jiho stood in the Emergency Defense Council meeting. facing leaders from every nation. The room was tense. The initial victory had brought celebration, but now reality was setting in. "They'll send more ships," said President Kim of the Pacific Alliance. "How many can we handle?" "Intelligence suggests they have access to thousands of vessels," replied Sumi, head of Earth's Intelligence Division. She was young but brilliant, having cracked the Velkaran communication codes years ago. "The fleet we defeated was only a fraction of their military power." "Then we can't win," someone said from the back of the room. "We can," Taeyang interrupted, standing up. "But we need to show you something. Something that's been kept secret even from most of you." He activated a holographic display. What appeared was so shocking that several council members gasped. It showed a weapon, massive, complex, and terrifying in its implications. "Project Requiem," Taeyang explained. "A gravity manipulation device capable of creating a controlled singularity, essentially a miniature black hole. We developed it 3 years ago but never tested it at full scale. The potential for catastrophic failure was too high." "You built a weapon that could destroy Earth?" President Kim asked, her voice sharp with anger. "We built a weapon that could save Earth," Taeyang corrected, "but using it as a last resort. If we miscalculate, the singularity could become unstable. It could consume the entire solar system." Hana, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "There has to be another way." "Diplomacy, negotiation." "They don't negotiate," Sumi interrupted. "I've analyzed every recorded interaction the Velkarans have had with other species. They offer surrender or destruction, nothing else. There's no middle ground in their culture." Jiho listened to the debate, his mind working through scenarios and outcomes. He had hoped that defeating the First Fleet would make the Velkarans reconsider. But empires built on conquest don't back down from a single loss. They escalate. Meanwhile, in a small medical facility on Mars Colony, fighter pilot Minho sat with his squadron mates, reviewing combat footage from the battle. His hands shook slightly as he held his drink, not from fear but from exhaustion. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind the reality of what they'd done. "We killed 38 enemy pilots," said his wingman, Jemin. "How many of them had families waiting for them?" Minho didn't answer. He'd been thinking the same thing. War was supposed to be about defending humanity, but every kill had been a thinking, feeling being. The Velkarans might be conquerors, but they were still people. "We did what we had to," Minho said finally. "They came here to enslave us or kill us. We didn't start this war." Back on Earth, xenobiologist Jinwoo presented his findings to the Defense Council. He had studied the biological samples recovered from the destroyed Velkaran ships, and his discoveries were significant. "The Velkarans evolved on a world with lower gravity than Earth," Jinwoo explained. "Their bodies are stronger than ours in some ways, but they're not built for our environment. Earth's gravity, our atmospheric pressure, even our oxygen levels, it's all too much for them. That's why they stay in their ships during invasions." "Can we use that against them?" Jiho asked. "Already working on it," Jinwoo replied. "But there's something else. Their culture is rigidly hierarchical. They follow orders without question. That's a strength, but it's also a weakness. They don't adapt well to unexpected situations. They rely on doctrine and established tactics." Sumi nodded, adding, "Which is why our trap worked so well. We did something outside their experience, but now they know we're unpredictable. General Thexar won't make the same mistakes Commander Dravix did." 3 weeks later, the Velkaran response arrived. Not 300 ships this time, but over 1,000. They dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, filling the sky with their dark hulls. At the center of the fleet was Thexar's flagship, twice the size of any other vessel, bristling with weapons. Jiho watched from Aurora Station as the massive fleet took position. His stomach felt like lead. They had won the first battle through surprise and preparation. But this time the enemy knew what they were facing. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," the communications officer said. General Thexar appeared on the screen. He was older than Dravix, his scales marked with scars from countless battles. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute confidence. "Humans of Earth," Thexar began. "I am General Thexar, Supreme Commander of the Velkaran military. I have studied your tactics. I have learned from Commander Dravix's mistakes. You will not trick us again." Jiho said nothing, keeping his face neutral. "You fought well," Thexar continued. "For primitives, you showed cunning and courage. That is why I make this offer one time only. Surrender now and you will be treated with honor. Your species will serve the Empire in positions of respect. Refuse and I will reduce your world to ash. You have 12 hours, the transmission ended. The command deck was silent. Everyone looked to Jiho, waiting for orders, for a plan, for hope. Get me Taeyang, Jiho said quietly, and prepare Project Requiem for possible activation. Sir, that's... Someone started to protest. I know what it is, Jiho snapped. But look at that fleet. We're outnumbered 3-1. Our tricks won't work twice. If we're going to survive this, we need every option available. Captain Nari's voice came through from her station. Admiral, even if we win this battle, they'll just send more ships. We can't fight an entire empire. No, Jiho agreed. But we can make them regret ever coming here. We can make the cost so high that conquering Earth becomes more trouble than it's worth. In the hidden facility beneath the Alps, Taeyang and his team began the activation sequence for Project Requiem. The weapon hummed to life, its energy readings climbing steadily. If they used it, there was a 30% chance of catastrophic failure. But if they didn't use it, there was a 100% chance of defeat. Across Earth, people watched the skies with the same fear and defiance they had shown during the first invasion. But this time there was less confidence. The alien fleet was massive, overwhelming. Even those who believed in humanity's strength felt doubt creeping in. Minho sat in his fighter, ready to launch. His squadron had been reinforced, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. The Velkaran fleet had hundreds of fighters. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and this time the enemy wouldn't fall for the same traps. All pilots, this is Admiral Jiho, the voice came through their communications. I won't lie to you. The next few hours will determine whether humanity survives or falls. But I want you to remember something. They came to our home. They threatened our families. They think we'll kneel because they have more ships. Show them why that's a mistake. Show them what humans do when we're backed into a corner. The 12-hour deadline ticked away. Thexar's fleet began moving into attack formation. Earth's defenses powered up, knowing they were about to face a battle that would make the first one look like a training exercise. And somewhere in deep space, hidden in the shadow of Jupiter's moons, something watched and waited, something that would change everything. The Battle of Luna began without warning. General Thexar didn't wait for the deadline to expire. At the 11-hour mark, his fleet opened fire. Purple energy beams lanced through space, striking Earth's orbital platforms. The humans had expected tricks and deception, but Thexar gave them honest, brutal warfare. Captain Nari's Aurora station took the first hits. The shields held, but the power drain was enormous. She couldn't fire the railgun while maintaining shields against this level of bombardment. It was a choice between offense and defense, and Thexar knew it. Redirect power from non-essential systems, Nari ordered, and get me firing solutions on their command ships. The battle spread across Earth's orbit within minutes. Minho's fighter squadron launched from the moon base, joining hundreds of other human craft against the Velkaran swarm. The enemy fighters were everywhere, purple engines blazing as they wove through the defensive formations. Stay in pairs, Minho commanded his squadron. Don't chase them into open space. They want to separate us. The tactics that had worked before were useless now. Thexar had studied the battle recordings. He knew about the hidden platforms, the ambush strategies, the coordinated attacks. His forces moved with precision, targeting the weapon systems that humans had relied on. On Earth, Jiho watched the battle unfold with growing dread. They were losing. Not quickly, but steadily. For every Velkaran ship destroyed, Earth lost 2. The mathematics of attrition would doom them within hours. Admiral, we've lost contact with Mars colonies, reported the tactical officer. Last transmission said Velkaran ground forces had landed. Jiho closed his eyes briefly. Mars. The red planet had been humanity's first true colony, home to 3 million people. Now it was under attack, and there was nothing he could do to help them. Sir, young Officer Hanul is requesting permission to speak with you, his aide said. He says it's urgent. Jiho nodded, and moments later, the junior officer appeared on his screen. Hanul was stationed at a listening post, monitoring Velkaran communications. Admiral, I've detected something unusual, Hanul said, speaking quickly. The Velkaran fleet isn't just attacking. They're positioning themselves in a specific formation around the sun. I ran the pattern through our analysis systems, and sir, I think they're preparing something big. Show me, Jiho demanded. The tactical display shifted, showing the Velkaran ship movements. Hanel was right. While most of the fleet engaged Earth's forces, a smaller group of specialized vessels was moving toward the inner solar system, toward the sun. Sumi's voice broke into the channel. "Admiral, I've intercepted Velkaran command communications. They're using code words that translate to stellar cleansing, I think. Oh God, I think they're going to destabilize the sun." The command deck went silent. Destabilize the sun. It was the ultimate scorched earth tactic. If they couldn't conquer Earth, they would eliminate it entirely. The entire solar system would become a graveyard. "How long do we have?" Jiho asked, his voice steady despite the horror of what he was hearing. "Their science vessel is approaching the sun now," Sumi replied. "Based on their trajectory, they'll be in position in 40 minutes. Once they activate whatever device they have, we'll have maybe hours before the sun begins to cascade." On the moon base, fighter pilot Minho received the emergency broadcast. All pilots were ordered to focus on the Velkaran science vessel. It was a suicide mission. The ship was heavily guarded and the human forces were already stretched thin. But there was no choice. "Jamin, take the squadron back to defend the orbital platforms," Minho said to his wingman. "I'm going after that science vessel." "That's suicide," Jamin protested. "You'll never make it through their defenses alone." "I know," Minho replied. "But if that ship reaches the sun, we're all dead anyway. At least this way, I might make a difference." Before Jamin could argue, Minho broke formation and accelerated toward the inner solar system. His fighter was fast, but not fast enough to outrun the Velkaran escorts. He would have to be clever. On Aurora Station, Nari made a decision. "Shut down all shields," she ordered. "Divert everything to the railgun." "Captain will be defenseless," her second-in-command protested. "Then we better make this shot count," Nari replied. She targeted the nearest Velkaran capital ship, a massive vessel that was coordinating attacks on Earth's orbital defenses. Without shields, Aurora Station would be destroyed within minutes. But those minutes might be enough. The railgun fired and the tungsten rod tore through the Velkaran ship like it was made of paper. The explosion was massive, and in the chaos it created, human forces pressed their advantage. It was a small victory, but it came at a terrible cost. Velkaran return fire hit Aurora Station, and Nari's crew scrambled to evacuate as the station began to break apart. Beneath the Alps, Taeyang stood before Project Requiem. The weapon was fully charged, ready to activate. But the risk was enormous. If the singularity became unstable, it wouldn't just destroy the Velkaran fleet. It would consume Earth as well. "Admiral Jiho is requesting authorization to activate," his assistant said. Taeyang stared at the weapon he had created. He had built it to save humanity, but using it might doom them just as surely as the Velkarans would. It was a choice between certain death and possible death. "Authorization granted," Taeyang said finally. "May whatever gods exist forgive us." Minho's fighter wove through the Velkaran defenses, his hands dancing across the controls with the skill born of 1,000 training hours. He took hits, his shields failing, his hull breaching in 3 places. But he kept going, driven by the knowledge that millions of lives depended on what he did in the next few minutes. The Velkaran science vessel loomed ahead, its strange, angular design unlike their warships. Minho could see the device attached to its hull, a massive array of equipment that pulsed with ominous energy. That was his target. "This is Minho to all Earth forces," he broadcast. "I'm making my run now. Tell my family. Tell them I did my duty." His fighter was loaded with antimatter missiles, enough explosive power to destroy a small moon. He armed them all, setting them for proximity detonation. There would be no coming back from this. Marine Commander Bora led a boarding team onto the science vessel in a desperate attempt to disable the device manually, but Velkaran security was too strong. They fought with everything they had, but they were being pushed back. "Bora to Minho," she transmitted. "We can't reach the device. You're our only chance." "Understood," Minho replied. "Get your team out of there. You have 30 seconds. He lined up his approach, compensating for the damage to his fighter's controls. The Velkaran escorts were firing on him, But he didn't dodge. Every evasive maneuver would throw off his aim, and he only had one shot at this, 20 seconds. Bora's team fought their way back to their transport ship. 10 seconds. Minho's fighter was falling apart around him, but the target was locked. 5 seconds. He thought of Earth, of his family, of every person who would die if he failed. 0. Minho's fighter, carrying enough antimatter to power a city for a year, struck the Velkaran science vessel. The explosion was visible from Earth, a second sun briefly blazing in the sky before fading. When the light cleared, both the science vessel and Minho's fighter were gone. On his flagship, General Thexar watched the explosion in silence. The human pilot had sacrificed himself without hesitation. It was the kind of act that Velkaran culture valued above all else, honorable sacrifice for one's people. For the first time since arriving at Earth, Thexar felt something like doubt. Then his attention was drawn to a new development. Between Earth and the Moon, space itself was beginning to distort. Energy readings spiked across his sensors, showing levels that should be impossible. "What is that?" he demanded. Project Requiem activated. A point of absolute darkness appeared in space, and around it, gravity began to dance to humanity's tune. The singularity was small, controlled, but its effects were enormous. Velkaran ships, caught in its gravitational field, were torn apart, their hulls unable to withstand the impossible forces. But the weapon was unstable, just as Taeyang had feared. The singularity was growing, its pull becoming stronger. If it couldn't be shut down, it would consume everything: Earth, the Moon, possibly the entire inner solar system. "We're losing containment," Taeyang reported, his voice tight with fear. "I need to shut it down now or we're all dead." "Do it," Jiho ordered. Taeyang initiated the shutdown sequence, but the singularity resisted, having gained its own momentum. For 10 agonizing seconds, humanity's fate hung in the balance. Then, slowly, the dark point began to collapse. The gravitational distortions faded. Project Requiem shut down, leaving behind a debris field of destroyed Velkaran ships. General Thexar looked at the carnage around him. Half his fleet was gone. The science vessel was destroyed, and the humans had shown they possessed weapons that could threaten the very fabric of space itself. His tactical advantage was gone. "All ships, withdraw to minimum safe distance," Thexar ordered. He opened a channel to Earth, his expression grim but respectful. "Humans of Earth, I offer honorable retreat. Let us end this battle before more warriors die on both sides." On his command deck, Jiho stared at the Velkaran general. They had won, but at a terrible cost. Aurora Station was destroyed, Mars was occupied, and Minho, along with hundreds of other pilots and soldiers, would never come home. "You had your chance to leave peacefully," Jiho replied, his voice cold. "We told you that you wouldn't get a second chance." Admiral Jiho stood in the command center, staring at the tactical display. General Thexar's offer of honorable retreat hung in the air like smoke. Around him, exhausted officers waited for his decision. They had won the battle, but everyone knew the cost. Aurora Station was debris, Mars was still occupied, and the list of casualties grew longer by the minute. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked his second-in-command. Jiho thought about Minho, about every pilot and soldier who had given everything to defend humanity. He thought about the warning he had given Commander Dravix weeks ago, a warning that had been ignored. "Open a channel to General Thexar," Jiho said, "and someone get me Isul from communications." Isul was a specialist in electronic warfare, young but talented beyond her years. She had been working on something that Jiho had authorized weeks ago, something that would change everything. When Thexar's face appeared on the screen, the Velkaran general looked different than before. The absolute confidence was gone, replaced by wary respect. He had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest and found warriors instead. "General Thexar," Jiho began, his voice steady and cold. "You speak of honorable retreat, but there is no honor in what you've done. You came to our home. You threatened our families. You tried to destroy our sun and kill billions of innocent people. War is war, Thexar replied. We did what we believed necessary to— No, Jiho interrupted. You did what you believed you could get away with. Because in 847 conquests, no one ever made you pay a real price. That ends today. Jiho nodded to Isolde. She had been working at her station, her fingers flying across the controls. Now she looked up and gave a thumbs-up signal. What have you done? Thexar asked, something like alarm creeping into his voice. I've sent a message, Jiho replied. To every world in your empire, to every species watching this conflict. Isolde, show him. The screen split, showing the Velcaron communication network. Across hundreds of worlds, billions of beings were watching the same broadcast. It showed the entire war, the Velcaron threats, the battles, the attempted stellar genocide, and humanity's victories. But most importantly, it showed that the mighty Velcaron Empire could be defeated. Your empire has ruled through fear, Jiho said. You've convinced the galaxy that resistance is futile, but we've shown them the truth. You can be beaten. You can be stopped. And every world you've conquered is watching right now, realizing that they don't have to submit anymore. On dozens of Velcaron-controlled worlds, the broadcast sparked something that had been dormant for years: hope. Resistance movements that had been hiding suddenly found their courage renewed. If primitive humans could fight the Velcaron Empire to a standstill, what could they do? General Thexar watched the cascade of rebellion beginning across his empire's territories. Centuries of conquest were being threatened by a single act of information warfare. The humans had found a weapon more powerful than any ship or bomb. They had given the conquered peoples hope. You've doomed billions to war, Thexar said, but his voice lacked conviction. You doomed them the day you conquered them, Jiho replied. We're just giving them a chance to be free. But I'm not finished. Your fleet is damaged, your forces are exhausted, and your empire is about to face rebellions on hundreds of worlds. I could let you retreat, but then you just rebuild and come back. So here are my terms. Jiho leaned forward, his expression hard as steel. You will withdraw all forces from this solar system immediately, including Mars. You will pay reparations for the damage you've caused. And most importantly, you will grant independence to every world your empire has conquered. Full independence with no conditions. Impossible, Thexar said. The High Council would never agree to— The High Council has no choice, Isolde interrupted, speaking up for the first time. I've also sent them projections showing what will happen if they refuse. Rebellions across hundreds of worlds. Economic collapse. Civil war. The Velcaron Empire will tear itself apart. Or they can accept these terms, grant freedom to their conquered territories, and salvage what remains of their civilization. On his flagship, Thexar consulted with his advisors. The humans were right. The Empire was facing its greatest crisis in history. They could continue fighting, but to what end? Earth had proven too costly to conquer, and the revelation of their defeats had already sparked uprisings across a dozen worlds. I must consult with the High Council, Thexar said finally, but I believe they will accept your terms. You have won not just this battle, but the larger war. The transmission ended. The command center erupted in cheers, but Jiho felt no joy. He looked at the casualty reports scrolling across his screen. Thousands of names, thousands of families who would grieve. Victory always came with a price. 3 days later, Hana led the diplomatic negotiations with the Velcaron High Council. The meeting took place on neutral ground, on a space station maintained by other alien species who had been watching the conflict. It was humanity's first formal introduction to the wider galactic community, and Hana was determined to make it count. The terms were harsh. The Velcaron Empire would grant immediate independence to all conquered worlds. They would dismantle their military to a defensive force only. They would pay reparations to Earth for the damage and loss of life. And they would submit to monitoring by a new galactic council to ensure compliance. These terms will destroy us, Council Leader Thrain protested. Our empire has stood for 1,000 years. Your empire was built on the suffering of others, Hana replied calmly. It's time for that to end. You can accept these terms and have a future, or you can reject them and watch your civilization collapse into civil war. The choice is yours. The Velcaron High Council accepted the terms. The age of their empire was over. In the weeks that followed, Earth became something it had never been before, a major power in galactic politics. 16 different alien species requested diplomatic relations. Some sought trade agreements. Others wanted military alliances. All of them had watched humanity fight and win against impossible odds. Taeyang personally destroyed all detailed records of Project Requiem. The weapon had saved Earth, but its existence was too dangerous. Future generations would know that humanity had possessed such power, but they would never know exactly how to recreate it. On Mars, the colonies were liberated. The occupation had lasted only days, but the scars would take years to heal. Still, people returned to their homes, determined to rebuild. A memorial was constructed on the moon, near the site where Minho had launched on his final mission. It listed every person who had died defending humanity. The names covered 3 massive walls, and each year on the anniversary of the first battle, people would gather there to remember. Captain Nari survived the destruction of Aurora Station. She was given command of a new station, one built with the latest technology and lessons learned from the war. She named it Phoenix. Admiral Jiho retired from active service, but he remained as an advisor to Earth's Defense Council. He would wake sometimes in the night, thinking about the decisions he'd made, wondering if there had been a better way. But he knew that sometimes there were no good choices, only necessary ones. 1 year after the invasion, a new alien delegation approached Earth. They broadcast peaceful intentions and requested permission to enter the solar system. Earth's new protocols were thorough, scanning their ships, verifying their claims, checking their history with other species. Nari, now in command of the new Phoenix station, reviewed the reports. Everything checked out. The aliens seemed genuinely peaceful. But after what happened with the Velkarans, humanity would never be naive again. She opened a channel to Jiho, who was in a meeting with the Defense Council. "Admiral, we have a new delegation requesting entry. They appear legitimate, but I'm waiting for your confirmation before granting access." Jiho reviewed the same reports Nari had seen. The aliens were from a scientific culture, known for their peaceful interactions with other species. They wanted to establish a research exchange program with Earth. "What do you think, Captain?" Jiho asked. "I think we should let them through," Nari replied, "but slowly, with escorts, and make sure they understand our policies." "Good instincts," Jiho said. "Proceed, Captain, and Nari. Make sure they understand that everyone gets one chance. They'd better not waste it." Nari smiled and opened communications to the alien delegation. "Attention incoming vessels, this is Phoenix Station. You are cleared to approach. Please maintain your current heading and speed. Escort ships will meet you at the designated coordinates. Welcome to Earth's solar system. We hope your visit will be peaceful and productive." The alien ships responded with gratitude and acknowledgement of Earth's protocols. They moved slowly and carefully, respecting the boundaries that humanity had established. From his office, Jiho watched the feeds showing the alien ships approaching peacefully. Beyond them, he could see Earth's defense network, stronger now than it had ever been. Hidden platforms, new weapons, trained crews ready to respond to any threat. The Velkaran invasion had changed humanity forever. They had learned that the galaxy was not safe, that threats could come from the stars themselves. But they had also learned that they could face those threats and win, not through overwhelming force, but through intelligence, preparation, and the willingness to sacrifice for each other. Earth had sent a message to the galaxy, one that would echo for generations. They were not conquerors. They were not empire builders. But they were not victims either. They were humanity, and they would defend their home against anyone who threatened it. And if challenged again, they would do exactly what they promised. Give one warning. One chance, nothing more. The stars that had once seemed so full of possibility now held both promise and danger. But humanity faced them with eyes open, ready for whatever came next. Because they had learned the most important lesson of all, in a dangerous galaxy, survival belonged to those who were prepared, those who were united, and those who never forgot the price of freedom.